Tade was running as fast as his legs could carry him, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. Shadows loomed all around, and the night was dark, save for a faint moonlight casting eerie glows over the graveyard. How did I get myself into this mess? He gasped, his breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. As he ran, he spotted a river in the distance, its waters shimmering under the moon. Safety was close, but just as he was about to dive in, his foot caught on something and he stumbled, hitting the ground hard. Groaning, he turned to see what had tripped him, and that's when he saw them. His blood froze. Ghosts. On the night when the moon turned crimson, bathing the land in its eerie red glow, the drums began to roll, echoing through the dense forests and quiet huts of Ajekun village. The people of Ajekun knew what the sound meant, the start of the sacred Oro ritual, a rite passed down for generations to protect the young men of the village as they crossed into adulthood. One by one, young men who had come of age stepped out of their huts, each dressed in a simple white wrapper tied around their waists. Their faces were serious, reflecting the importance of the night. They moved quietly, all heading in the same direction towards the sacred Ajekun River, where the oldest woman of the village, Iyaomi, waited. She alone held the knowledge of this ancient ritual. The young men walked in a straight file, silent and steady, as the forest whispered around them. Their bare feet padded softly on the damp earth, their breaths calm, but hearts pounding. It was said that this ritual would grant them strength and protection, keeping them from any unnatural death or harm. No one would be able to claim their lives, not man, not spirit. When they reached the river, the night was quiet, except for the sound of gentle waves brushing the riverbank. The young men stepped into the cold water, feeling it rise up to their knees as they formed a circle around Iyaomi, who stood on the shore with a calm but intense look on her wrinkled face. With the god of sacred water in her hand, Iyaomi spoke in a deep voice. Ọmọkùnrin Ajekun, tonight you are marked, so no man can take your life. Evil shall turn away from you, and no curse shall touch your skin. One by one, she poured the sacred water over their heads, murmuring words that only the spirits could understand. The young men felt a strange warmth spreading through them, as though their bones were being strengthened from within. Then, just as the last man was blessed, a sudden cold wind swept over the river, chilling them to the bone. Goosebumps rose on their skin as the icy gust carried with it a heavy, unseen presence that seemed to press upon the air. Each young man instinctively gripped his white wrapper tighter, eyes darting to one another, but no one dared to speak. They knew what came next. This was the moment that had haunted their minds since they were children. Iyaomi, standing silent and strong at the edge of the water, turned her gaze toward the dense forest. She spoke softly, almost as if addressing someone unseen in the shadows. The spirits have chosen a runner tonight. The words lingered in the air, heavy with the unspoken fear shared by all. Every year, this same ritual had blessed the young men of Ajekun, shielding them from evil, but it always demanded one among them to serve as a spirit's messenger. The errand man, the one who would serve as the messenger between the living and the dead, carrying the whispers and secrets from the world beyond. The big question hung in the air like a thick fog. Who is this messenger? On a bright sunny day in the bustling city of Lagos, Citibank was a hive of activity. The banking hall buzzed with people, some depositing money, others waiting to withdraw. Customers moved in and out, each focused on their own business. Suddenly, the shrill sound of tires screeching broke through the normal noise of the bank. A black jeep drove into the bank premises, coming to a sudden halt right in front of the entrance. Before anyone could react, 3 fierce-looking men stepped out, each with a hard gaze that sent shivers down anyone who dared to meet their eyes. One of the men moved quickly toward Tade, the security guard stationed at the entrance. Without a word, he pulled a gun from his coat and shoved it into Tade's face.
Open the door!
He hissed, his tone dark and threatening. With trembling hands, Tade unlocked the entrance, his heart pounding wildly. He had never faced anything like this before. The robber yanked him forward, roughly dragging him into the banquet hall, then quickly pulled on a black mask. A loud shout rang out as the robber fired his gun into the air, sending an explosion of panic through the room.
Everybody down!
One of the robbers shouted, his voice booming over the chaos as people dropped to the floor, trembling, trying to hide. The men moved swiftly, rounding up bags of cash from behind the counter. Tade lay flat on the ground, his face pressed against the cold tiles. He could feel his pulse racing. He prayed the men would just leave quickly, that no one would get hurt. But just as the robbers finished and were heading toward the exit, one of them sighted a woman making a call. A deafening crack filled the hall as he quickly shot at the woman, and also another woman who was beside her and the security man Tade. And in a split second, everything seemed to slow down. Tade fell to the ground, his body becoming strangely numb as everything blacked out. Around him, the sounds of crying, shouts, and wails filled the air. People rushed to the aid of the two women who lay motionless on the floor, their lifeless bodies in a pool of blood. Tade lay still, his body cold and pressed against the floor. But as the seconds ticked by, he became aware of something strange. He was still breathing, his heart still beat. He was alive. Tentatively, he lifted his head, blinking in confusion. His body wasn't in pain. There was no wound. Had the bullets missed him? Slowly, he pushed himself from the ground, glancing around the hall. The entire room was a blur of chaos. People weeping, others frantically calling for help, but no one was looking at him. He looked around at his body, brushing his chest, but felt nothing.
This must be a dream,
he muttered, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. Tade was shot in the head, but he did not die. The next day, when Tade arrived at the bank, he noticed two unfamiliar security men standing at the gate. Confused, he approached them.
Who are you?
He asked, trying to understand why they were there.
You be like say you blind.
One of them sneered.
You know they see well abi, you know say you be security men.
The other man let out a loud mocking laugh as he gave Tade a dismissive look. Something inside Tade twisted uncomfortably, but he said nothing more. He pushed past them and headed straight to the branch manager's office. He knocked and stepped in, taking a deep breath as he greeted his boss.
Good morning, sir,
he said, his voice tense. He cleared his throat, trying to keep his composure.
Sir, I just saw two new security men at the gate. I was wondering, what does this mean for me?
Mr. Ferrami's eyes finally lifted to meet his, and the expression on his face was cold and unfeeling. Without a word, he reached into a drawer, pulled out a letter and handed it to Tade.
Take, your services are no longer required in Citibank.
Mr. Ferrami said curtly.
You failed to stop the robbers and this bank has a reputation to maintain.
Tade's heart dropped as he clutched the letter, his fingers trembling.
Please, sir,
he pleaded, his voice breaking.
My family depends on this job. I had no way of stopping them. They had guns. What could I have done?
But Mr. Ferrami's expression remained unchanged, cold as stone.
I'm sorry, Tade. There is nothing more to discuss. You can collect your last paycheck from the finance office. Now, kindly leave.
Tade stood there, desperation glowing at his chest, but he knew that no amount of pleading would change his fate. Slowly, he turned and walked out of the office, each step heavier than the last. The day felt surreal as he stepped out into the bustling streets of Lagos, each step heavy as he moved through the busy streets. The noise of honking cars and lively vendors faded into a distant hum as he wandered aimlessly, his eyes unfocused, his heart heavy with fear and frustration. He didn't know where to go or what to do. The reality of the situation crushed him, the echoes of his family's needs ringing in his head.
How will I tell them? How will they survive now?
He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't notice the busy street he was about to cross. His steps were slow as he moved forward without looking. Then, the screech of tires jolted him back to the present, but it was too late. With a loud thud, the car struck him, throwing him to the ground, and everything went black. Tade was immediately rushed to the hospital. The doctors worked swiftly, checking his vitals, applying oxygen, using defibrillators, and trying every method to revive him, but their attempts fell short. After a few long tense minutes, one of the doctors glanced at the clock, then looked down at Tade's still body. With a solemn shake of his head, he declared,
"Time of death, 3:42 p.m.
Not long after, word reached Jumoke, Tade's wife. The news hit her like a storm. Tade, her husband, the father of their 2 young children, had been in a terrible accident. Panic clouded her as she rushed to the hospital, her heart pounding with fear and denial. When she finally arrived at the hospital, a nurse with a somber expression took her aside, and as the words slipped out, the world around her spun. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your husband, Tade Badejo, did not make it." "Irony!" Jumoke cried, her voice loud and defiant as she stumbled back, clutching her chest. She struggled to her feet, anger and desperation written across her face. "My husband, Tade, cannot die," she insisted, beating her chest as if willing her heart to believe her own words. Tade was the son of Ajekun, a man fortified by the ancient rituals of his people. He couldn't just die like any other man. Still trembling, she allowed herself to be led to the morgue, where Tade's body lay covered with a white sheet, pale and unmoving under the harsh fluorescent lights. Slowly, the attendant pulled back the sheet, revealing his face. Jumoke gasped as a wave of cold sweat drenched her skin. Her heart beat thundering in her chest. This lifeless figure before her couldn't be Tade. Her mind fought against the sight, rejecting it. "Tade me? Omo Korea Ajekun. You cannot die like a chicken. Is this even possible?" she whispered, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her cheeks, her mind reeling with questions. Back in the village of Ajekun, the news of Tade's sudden death spread like wildfire, setting tongues wagging and stirring whispers of disbelief. Beneath the mango tree, Adire leaned in close to her friend Aina, her voice hushed but tinged with excitement. "So Tade is truly dead," Adire exclaimed, her eyes widening. "A son of Ajekun, fortified by Yaomi's ritual, gone. Just like that. This means Yaomi is a scam," she sneered. "Maybe the rituals aren't as strong as they say." Adire scoffed, shaking her head. Others huddled in small groups, murmuring about Tade's death, their expressions a mix of fear and suspicion. Determined to find answers, the elders of Tade's family gathered themselves and made their way to Yaomi's hut, their faces drawn with confusion and anger. As they arrived, they wasted no time flooding her with questions.
"Yaomi!"
called Baba Adefemi, Tade's uncle, his voice laced with anger.
"How can Tade be dead? Did he not take part in that ritual years ago?"
Others murmured in agreement, their faces twisted with doubt and fear.
"Was it all a lie, yeah? We trusted you. Our sons trusted you. Yet here we are, burying one of our own at only 28.
Yaomi narrowed her eyes, then raised her wooden staff high enough above her head. "Otito!" she shouted, her voice cracking like thunder. The elders froze, their voices caught in their throats. "No son of Ajekun can die an unnatural death. If you doubt my power, you doubt the gods themselves. Now, leave my sight before the gods strike you all." A chill ran down their spines, and without another word, they fled. Days passed, each one weighing heavily on Tade's family. With no answers to suit their sorrow, they made preparations to bury him on the 7th day. His death, the first unnatural one in the entire village of Ajekun, weighed heavily on the hearts of everyone. The morning of Tade's burial was somber, with nearly everyone in Ajekun cloaked in grief. Tade was only 28, Though he married early, he had barely begun to build his life. His death was the first of its kind in Ajekun, a cruel riddle that haunted every villager. As his family laid him in state in his father's compound, people gathered in a long queue to pay their last respects. One by one, they approached his still body, sorrow etched deep on their faces. Old men sighed, young men lowered their heads, and the women wept, mourning the loss of a promising life cut short. Then, just as the last mourner was about to turn away, the coffin shook. If you enjoyed this story and would like to know how the story progressed, please consider subscribing to this channel, not forgetting to turn on the bell notification icon so that once the next part of this video is being posted, you will be the first to be notified. You can also check out these videos here. I promise you won't be disappointed. Till we meet again in my next video, remain blessed.